Good afternoon and welcome to St Peter Mancroft Church, whether you are in church or online. I'm Catherine Waddams, a licensed lay minister here, and this is our weekly live-streamed reflection, one of events each weekday at 1 o'clock here in St Peter Mancroft Church. And today I want to ask, what would you vote for? Not who. The question is hypothetical for most of us, because although tomorrow is local election day for much of the country, there are no elections in areas like Norfolk and Suffolk who are proposing major local government reorganisation, except, as it happens, a by-election for this ward, both on the County Council and City Council, following Jamie Osborne's resignation. But my attention was caught this week not by our local elections, but by the general election in Canada on Monday, not least because of a rather surprising personal connection with it, beyond my brother's Canadian family in Toronto. When I was 11, my family moved to a small, rather old-fashioned village 15 miles south of Ottawa, where my father was rector of the Anglican Church for 3 years. Manotick, which means tree-covered island in the river in Algonquin, was then just transforming itself from an agricultural village to a suburb of professionals in the capital. And now, 65 years later, it has been firmly subsumed into Greater Ottawa. The Canadian electoral system is based on ours, each area voting for a representative on a first-past-the-post system. Since 2004, the MP for Manotick's constituency, which is known as Carleton, has been Conservative and represented by Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Conservative Party. The next door constituency is Nepean, another of the townships in my father's parish, where Mark Carney, who we know mainly as the former governor of the Bank of England, stood as MP in Monday's election. It's a bit like having Kemi Badenoch contesting Norwich North while Keir Starmer was standing in Norwich South. So at the boundaries, there were large election boards on big front lawns, considerably bigger than our rather discreet bus stop estate agent type notices on sticks, urging people to vote for their local candidates, who happened to include the leaders of both parties. That coincidence even made The Guardian last week, which was where I picked up on it. In the end, Carleton, including Manotick, switched from Conservative to Liberal, so Pierre Poilievre lost his seat, and Carney, who was elected for neighbouring Nepean, now has a fellow Liberal as a neighbouring MP. Apart from the personal interest for me of Manotick's voting habits, the whole election has been a real lesson in electoral reversal. Until a few weeks ago, the deeply unpopular Liberal Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, and his Liberal Party was expected to lose the forthcoming general election heavily, mainly because of cost of living issues. But Trudeau resigned as leader of the Liberals in January, and as in our system, the newly elected leader, Mark Carney, became Prime Minister, even though he didn't have a seat in Parliament, but only had a few months to run before an election had to be called. When it came, Carney reversed that situation and won. And the main factor, not surprisingly, is Donald Trump's threats to annex Canada as the 51st state and his imposition of tariffs on Canada, a country very susceptible to such economic weapons because the US is such a large trading partner. Now, one thing Canadians are generally very keen to tell you is that they are not American. They have a very distinct sense of differentiation and a reputation for generally being polite, and some say, unkindly, I think, boring. If being polite means being woke, I can see that Trump would find them quite a threat along his long northern border. And the Canadians have a proud, if rather short in our terms, history of being loyal to Britain in the American War of Independence, of offering refuge to those fleeing the States over several centuries, whether from slavery or the draft. It's quite understandable that Trump doesn't like what they stand for. So the Canadians reacted very badly to Trump's threat. My sister-in-law wrote of feeling sad, angry, and scared at the political situation. As some headlines put it, Trump has won his second election in 6 months. He has won the Canadian election for the Liberals. This was partly because the Conservative leader seemed too like Trump, attributes which became particularly unpopular after the American threats. But even more because Canadians focused on what came to matter to them, the survival and welfare of the overall community, rather than their own individual cost of living worries, which of course are still there. This outside threat made voters think not of their own needs, but of what their community, in this case Canada, needed as a whole. The Liberal who ousted the Conservative leader in Carleton said that his voters, including those in Manotick, cared most about Trump and tariffs, that he would work to bring the people together. We are all Canadian, we have to look out for ourselves and we have to take care of each other, he wrote. Of course, this hasn't solved Canada's problems. The election also highlighted remaining splits, especially between the oil and gas-rich provinces of Alberta and Saskatchewan, who continue to feel alienated from the centre of power in Ottawa, more than 2,000 miles away. But it did show how focusing on the needs of the whole community affected many voters' behaviour, which took me to wondering how any of us would choose to cast our vote, were we to have a chance to do so, of course. Politicians seem to put more and more emphasis on the personal gains they can promise to us as individuals, how they can make us each better off. And I can't help wondering if they have an eye on the groups which vote most. A higher proportion of older people vote, and everyone is very keen to defend the triple lock on pensions, which protects their, indeed, I'm one of them, our standard of living at the expense of other parts of the population. In this country, it's the cost of living and the NHS which are the most important issues for voters across the political spectrum. While many people continue to struggle with the cost of living crisis, as well as general uncertainty and anxiety, it would be refreshing to see a more rounded emphasis on well-being, on a fairer society, which recognises that some people don't have enough to live decently, while others have plenty, and isn't afraid to promise higher taxes for richer people in exchange for helping those who need more help. More honesty about some of the short-term costs of moving towards net zero, rather than promising more to everyone, would also make for a better debate about what sort of society we really want. I hope we don't need an existential crisis of the sort that Canada is facing to make us more aware of the importance of nurturing and, yes, paying for the sort of society we want to live in. It will be interesting to see what other people vote for tomorrow, even though they aren't directly relevant to us in this part of the country. Thank you for listening, and every blessing for the rest of your day.